I am Norma Maxwell. I would like to tell you about my mother and father. My father was born in Newton Abbot, England. His father was killed working in a leather factory. He had an arm that was severed by a belt and he died from it. And my dad was sent to live with his grandmother and grandfather in Newton Abbot. Grandfather Curry came over to America and worked here for a while in Vineland, New Jersey on the railroad. Then he sent back to England for my grandmother and my father. My brother also had a stepsister and a stepbrother. The stepsister was going through an apple orchard in England, and supposedly they were just climbed over the fence to get an apple to eat, and the man came out and scolded and went to hit her like with a cane, and she died of a heart attack. Okay, my dad worked in Vineland, New Jersey on the railroad, and he came to Egg Harbor City and worked on the Pennsylvania Railroad. And when he was working on the railroad, my mother was getting off of a train and she slipped and fell, and he, in a big joke, decided to pick her up. And when he did, he said something about being a girlfriend, and that's how he met my mother. My mother was living in Pomona on a farm, and she was going to Philadelphia to work in a home as a maid. And her first big mistake she made working in Philadelphia as a maid, they sent her down to the cellar to get onions, and when she came up, she had the man's prize tulip bulbs instead. So anyway, when she worked in Philadelphia and crossed the Delaware River and get off the ferry and go into town, she would pass where they were unloading the William Penn statue that's on top of City Hall. And each day she would come back home to the farm and then go back for the week. She would notice how the things were changing about William Penn. She saw his head was separate, the arm was separate, and so on. And then this would be something that she would watch when she traveled back and forth from Pomona to Philadelphia. My father was shipped over to work on the Pennsylvania Railroad on the Atlantic Philadelphia line, and he lived in a house near the farm where my mother lived. And then he used to tell about living in this big house on the point of the road, and they claimed that there were so many bed bugs that the house turned around and faced the other way. And that's what he would tell. And then he would also tell us about how he would date my mother, and they would ride on a horse, and he would just put the reins and tell the horse to go home. And that's how they had a long date, because he would tell. You ready? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. This isn't going to work. I can't think of the darn thing. Isn't it awful? My mother lived in Egg Harbor at the time when it was completely German, and my father, being an Englishman, was told that he would never make it in Egg Harbor because he wouldn't be able to carry on a conversation, and the people just wouldn't like an Englishman invading their German town. So lots of times my mother would send him to the drugstore to buy medicine or so on, and they would always play a joke on him and not give him the right thing. And then, of course, when he got home with it, she would scold him in German and send him back to get whatever he was supposed to get. And my dad overcame this problem by playing squeeze box accordion. I don't know, the kind with the buttons, and would play it. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, so he would go to lodge meetings and so on, and he learned how to get along with the people being German by playing his music. They always liked him to play. So his first organization that he joined was the Redmen in Egg Harbor City, and he became the chief Pocahontas. And because of his way of getting along with the people and his music, he was usually the head of parades in the town when they would have a special holiday. The one I can remember most was when I was a little girl, and it was George Washington's 150th anniversary, and my father was George Washington. And he was supposed to ride a white horse. And when they got all set up for the parade to start, and he came with his dressed up like George Washington, and he wanted to get on the horse, and the horse wouldn't let him get on. So he had to just parade in the parade without the horse. And I can remember the costumes that they wore. We had an auditorium at that time in Egg Harbor, and that's where the graduations, basketball, and all those kind of things were held. And they had this big program. Everybody was dressed in beautiful gowns and so on for a George Washington ball. And my father had his white wig, and they would, have a special week for George Washington celebration. Later on, as he went on, he was in the Board of Education in Egg Harbor, and he also became mayor in 1939. I was a senior in high school, and they have a trial run on voting, and my father won in school. So when I came home at lunchtime, I said, "Pop, you don't have to worry about anything. You're going to be mayor because the kids in school say so." And he won the election and was mayor of Egg Harbor City. My mother was interested in the women's part of called the Pocahontas Rebecca Lodge. And later on in life, she was interested in the community in Civic Club, and she was president of the Civic Club, and loved to play cards. She stayed home for years when my dad would go to all kind of meetings. So then when he retired, she said it was her turn to go out, and she loved to play cards. So I was the one that had to walk with her to go to the different halls and so on, and organizations, so she could play pinochle. Around home, whenever any of the family would come back home, my mother always made clam chowder in a big pot, and she would make cinnamon buns and donuts, which is called Fosnacht at Easter time. And they would first thing get out the deck of cards. Of course, the kids would have to go upstairs to bed, and the rest of the big people would stay up and have the cinnamon buns and play cards. Oh, now I'm stuck. Here we go. All right, my mother had 7 children. The first 3 were born in 1900, 1901, 1902. My oldest brother's name was William, and he graduated from Egg Harbor High School, and then he went to business school in Philadelphia, and he had a job in Philadelphia. He married and had 2 children. 3, excuse me. Jane, Bill, and Charlie. And they lived in Greenbelt, Maryland. His wife's name was Martha, and we called her Blondie. My sister, next, Louise Sculthorpe, and she was working at Amatol up the White Horse Pike in World War I. She married Tom Sculthorpe, and she had 2 boys, Stanley and Harold. My brother George worked in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He studied to become electrical engineer in Westinghouse, and he worked, I can't think what you call it, but it was the big engines and things, turbines. And during World War II, he would be sent all over the country for war efforts and seeing about turbines and so on to help with the efforts and machinery during World War II. He had a wife, May, and 2 daughters, Betty and Jean. Then my sister Ann was born, and Ann became a school teacher, and before she became a school teacher, I was born, the baby of the 7, and at that time they were reading German in the Egg Harbor schools because it was a German community, and because of the war, they decided they wouldn't read German anymore, and she said she was going to stay home and take care of the new baby. And they threw out all the German books from the school windows, and that ended having German in Egg Harbor City, except in the churches. The church, Lutheran church, still had services in German. Then my brother Chuck was born, and they tell stories about how he and the young man across the street, it was like a farm area around where our house is now, and he tells a story that before I was born, my father called to him and gave him 50 cents and said, "Go up and tell Dr. Frank to come and you can go fishing." And he says, "Boy, did we hurry off and have fun, because we never before were told that we could go fishing in the middle of the workday." Chuck married and Rebecca, and they live in Absecon, New Jersey. Then my sister Martha, who's 8 years older than I am, lived in the house on Washington Avenue, and they moved to the house, and she was born in the new house where we lived in Washington Avenue, and she's 8 years older than I am. She said I ruined it for her because she was the one that was the baby, and every time they'd go someplace, she would get to go along. And then when I came along, of course, that ended all of that, and she was disappointed. But we always had to share a room together, and best of friends as far as that's concerned. I was lucky because all my sisters and their boyfriends would take me places, like going to the movies and going to see a show and so on, go for a ride in new cars and so on. And that's how I was brought up, as being the spoiled brat, as she always called me. That's all our family now, 7 of us. And when I started to teach school, the children used to ask about family and so on, and they couldn't understand how I could be the baby when I was so old and had white hair. I had white hair when I was very young, and they would think I was real old. And they would ask me questions about how old I was, and I would never tell them. When Michael was little, he always wanted to know how old Anna was, and she wouldn't tell either how old she was. But finally he figured it out, because one day she told him about a doll that she had, and he says, how old were you when you got that doll? And then when she told him how old she was, he could figure out how old Anna was. I can't think anymore.
Moving now, huh? Oh yeah, okay. Well, this is supposed to be in my history of my family. Well, I don't know too much about it. I know my mother and father got married in June 15th, 1917. And he told about when he was courting my mother, he used to run all through the woods from Wading River to Lower Bank. The road come from the way by down in Turtle Creek Road, and from there he run up to the boatworks, back where the boatworks is today, it leaks. Back in there and come into the woods of my grandfather's farm. So that's where I don't know just how they met. But anyway, that's what happened. So then, of course, I was born in 1922, 7th of February. And so I was told I was born in an awful storm, in a snowstorm, and the doctor went to come around, and the wagon run off the doggone road, and they had to get a horse and pull it off. That was before they had the road through the woods over the river, Lower Bank, Egg Harbor. He used to go over to the old Gloucester Road. And so they had to get him out and come and take care of me. So, and of course, I don't know what my father, he worked for the boatwork for years and years. And then, of course, later on, I went to work, and when I was about 15 years old, I got my first new bicycle. 1958 or it was. No, 1938. 38. And it came to Egg Harbor, and I had to go to work and put it all together. Because my mother had an old 26 Chevy, and I didn't have a room to put it inside the car. So I broke the case down and put it together right there at the train station, which isn't there anymore. And so I started home on the bicycle riding, and all of a sudden a big rainstorm come up, and I got out far as the lake and started hailing and everything else. And I held on the car, and my mother was driving, I held on the door handle of the car and just took it easy. I couldn't see where I was going, I just watched where I was going. With a wheel on the road, that's all I could see. So I held it that way, and it was hailing in one ear and raining right on through the other, because there ain't nothing in there. So I got far as the Lower Bank Bridge, and she's still raining, so I shot off of that into the boatworks and waited till it cleared up and made it home. So my bicycle had a good Christmas. I still got it today. It's 50 years old. And I was 51 years old now, coming up. Let's see. So then I went to work and finally left to go to sea. And left in December the 13th, 1939. and I went to Boston, Massachusetts at Everett to pick up the ship there. And I went to sea. It was cold or something. But that same day, I don't know, when I left, I had a funny feeling something was wrong. And then after I went to sea, and I got a letter from my mother, I found out my father all but drowned that day. He went to work, and he was out with the boys fishing on the river there, and down at Deep Point, down near Weed River, on Mullica, and he had two guys there taking the boat, rowing the boat, and laying the net off while he was on the shore holding the line and walking along. And they had a stiff current there to come up, and instead of just wrapping around and holding on to the rope, he went to work and he tied it, and he couldn't get it untied. So the water there is 30 feet deep right off the beach, and the meadows there, and dropped right down. So he felt him pulling himself in there, and he couldn't do nothing about it. So he went right in. He had a pair of brand new boots he bought that day, and he went to work and tried to get his knife out of his pocket to cut the rope and couldn't do it. So he went to work and he kicked his boots off. And he paddled. He can't swim. He just paddled up like a dog. Came up and he let go, stop, and he let it go down and take a good breath of water, air right away. And then he would go for a while. When he needed air, he'd go to get to the bottom and kick and come up and get a breath of air, and he'd go under again. It was cold. It must have been very close to zero that morning. So he kept doing that, and the guys seen what happened. They figured he was going. They seen him go down for 3 times, and that was it. But he kept going. So they just turned right around and threw the net off and went back and got him. So they got him and took him ashore. And he went to work in Earl Hill, where he went to work in his and he carried him on his back through the meadows there. My father said, "Let me down." He said, "I can't stand it, it's too cold." His pants was froze pretty stiff, everything, so he ran through the grass. He didn't have no boots on, he just had his socks, and he lost his sock. He didn't know what his sock happened to. But he didn't even know when that happened, it's so cold. So they finally got him ashore and brought him back home. And they told me he went to work that night, got him with Egg Harbor, and got him a new pair of boots, and went fishing again the rest of the day again. So, but he didn't catch no cold right, I guess. So that's when I heard that. And then, of course, my mother, she used to be a good skater. She's a regular tomboy. Anything a boy would do, she would do. So she had my pair of skates. And she was out there skating backwards, showing them how good she could skate. And she got her foot caught in the crack of the ice, and it flipped her and broke her wrist. So that was the end of that. So she went to work, and I wrote and told her to get rid of them. She said, "No." He says, "You might want them someday, And I says, "I don't want them. If you're going to do that," I said, "if I leave them in the house, you'll be foolish enough to do it again." So I made her sell them and get rid of them. So I never could skate anyway, stand up. I'd fall down. So then I went to work at sea for a year or so, and then the captain, he brought his daughter on a ship with another girl. So of course, I was up in the wheelhouse there steering, and they'd come up once in a while and I'd wander around. And old Chief Benson, he'd say, "Hey, see that girl? Meet her. Talk to her." I said, "No." So just kept on going that way all the time, So then I finally, in 1941, I had appendicitis. So I was in the hospital, and I finally come home, and somebody knocked at the door, and here was my wife-to-be, not knowing it. So she came to see what was wrong with me and how it's come along. So that's what started a connection there. So I made a date with her, took her out a couple of times, I guess it was, and went back to sea again. But I wasn't supposed to go back until the 15th of January. I had appendicitis, was operated on, and first day of December in 1941. So I was there when Pearl Harbor was hit and stayed. And when I got out, they told me I wasn't supposed to go back to sea again until the 15th of January at the earliest. Well, my ship come back and I left. Went back, and back the first of the month in January. So I was out there be ahead of time and stayed out there until after the war was over. And I come home, and of course, well, I was in 1945. My wife wanted me to come home and get married. See, we want to get married. And I told her, well, I'll be home the 15th regardless. I have to get off ahead of time. So I seen how the time was running. And I said, well, that knows me jumping off ahead of time. I'll stay and get up north. I have plenty of time. So we chugging up here and taking our time, come up the East Coast and get up here just in time. Get in there and go. Just had about a couple hours to make it. That was all. And I said, I got off the bus and I walked up to the sidewalk and looked in the window. She didn't see me, of course. I looked and watched her. Here she is waiting by the phone. Waiting by the phone. So I went to work and I rang the doorbell and that was it, you know. So we got married June the 15th, 1945. So, oh well, it's one of them things, you know. So then finally I stayed there, went back and stayed another year. And she came down and met me the first year in North Carolina. And she was walking along the dock and I didn't know who the hell she was either. She was with a big Marine Division guy, the superintendent advisor of it. So he was walking her down there and I looked at her and she didn't know who the hell she was. Couldn't find me either. I had a beard on. So he says to her, he says, hey, where's your husband? She says, I don't know, I don't see him. So he says, was you one of these guys that got married in an overnight did you? So that's why I went there. She came and we was staying at the Wilmington Hotel, Wilmington, North Carolina, where we came in. And she went to work and she complained to me that she couldn't sleep in the hotel there because where she had to give a rental room right alongside the damn elevator. The elevator goes up and down, swoosh, swoosh, bang, boom, you know. So I went down and I told them I wanted another room. She said, what's the matter? I said, my wife, she said she can't sleep in it. So I want another room where I'm going to go out and leave another. So they give us another room, but it wasn't much better. Just a little cubby hole, but that was all right. So we went back to Shipton next day or two, whatever it was. We stayed in there, and she said to me, can't you? He was born from Wilmington, North Carolina to Hopewell, Virginia. So she said, can't you stay off and go over there? I says, no, I can't do that. She said, well, ask to meet chief mate. So I went and seen Rod Matthews. So he says he couldn't say nothing about it. He didn't care. But of course, your brother asked the chief mate. I mean the captain. So I went and seen Captain Oscar Wallace, and he says, why not? He said, just be there at 8 o'clock in the morning. That's all. And when we're supposed to sail, so we packed up our bag and took off. But he said, yeah, every time we got ready to sail, I needed supply to them. He said, you always was on board, but he says, and he took him aboard, and the other guys was off. He says, let them work for a while, for a change. Well, we took them on and went back, so we went up to Norfolk, Virginia, and went on in there to Hopewell. So we were supposed to leave that morning, and I had to kiss her goodbye, goodbye. So I went back and got back there and just got back about an hour ahead of time anyway. Well, it seemed because we didn't sail that quick and left. So then I went down south and we kept going down South America and around getting the oil. So we went down. He was coming back. She wanted me home for the first year anniversary, so I said, I'll be there. So I left her sit there for waiting for that, So when I got up up here, she met me, her and Ann met me. And when she see me, walked out on the dock. Our time the sun time was midnight. Standard time, but short time was 1 o'clock. It's daylight saving. and we were supposed to go on strike at 12 o'clock. So it was a one hour overdue, but I was getting off and everything, so it didn't bother me. So I was there, and you'd be surprised what she handed me. She handed me a draft notice for the United States Army. Report the 17th. So she said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, ain't much you can do about that thing, you know." So she handed me another letter. Of course, she didn't know which one you should hand me, but sometimes she handed me the right way, I guess. So she handed me the second one that says, "Forget it. You got your time in." So that was it. So I came home, and then I went to work and got a job through my wife. She knew the people, and got me a job at Reynolds Winery. So I was there about a year and a half, something like that. So they used to make us champagne over there, and used to take that and work. And they finally put me in there with the guys pumping the wine in. They was filtering the wine. Sure, of course, a lot of people don't know the secret of aging the wine. They used to put it in a big filter. Now we have this asbestos craze on everybody, but that time they didn't know nothing about the asbestos, you know. But they had these big filters made of asbestos, and they went to work and put them in there, and they squeezed a tube pipe in this way and come out, and we put it back into a vat. And every time she went through that thing, she was 4 years old. So that's how they age it. The secret's out now. So otherwise, I'd be got up on me, pump it back inside up there. I'd take care of up on the top with a hose and put it into the pump, and didn't have only about a foot or two clearance up there. You just lay on top of the darn thing and put the hose in. And I'd be up there. I didn't know it. I was coming home drunk half the time. I didn't know it. So we had in 1948. They had a doctors' convention in Lake City. So they had this doctors' convention, and the doctors didn't want their wives down there, so they shipped them out with a bus to Winners Winery to go take a tour and get a taste of the booze. So we was ready to go home, about a half an hour before we were ready to go home, and Mr. Dilly, he went to work and said, "Hurry up and get cleaned up, boys. We're gonna have a party. All this champagne's got to be drank up." I said, "Why?" "Well, he says, charged out for advertisement." He says, "There it is, and drink all you want." So I was there helping them tap the darn thing for the guys to drink. And old John says to me, "Hey, have some, Max, have some." I says, "I don't drink." He says, "Who are you kidding?" So that's when I found out I was half polluted a lot of times, just from the fumes all the time, because I don't drink. And all the guys, they say, he don't drink, John." He said, "What do you mean you don't drink?" "That's right, he don't drink." So, because I had champagne, I got there, I saved it for my daughter's wedding, which happened years later, at least years later, yeah, at least about 18 years, when she got married, or 20, I don't know just what it was now, but anyway, so I had this bottle of champagne I saved just special for her wedding. Damn thing turned sour, because every time I put it in the cellar, I'd lay it down where it's supposed to be laid, and the kids pick it up, stand it up, and they supposed to lay down, supposed to stand up. So the champagne was no good for her wedding. So maybe that's why the poor girl had so much bad luck. So that's the way it had been going on and off all the time. I remember my boy, he used to, then I changed that and went to work for Reynolds Winery. So my boy, every time I go to Nuri's rather, I went to work at the Nuri Mirror Company. I spent something like six years and 3 months or something like that. And when I'd leave to go to work, he'd always come out there and he'd want to sip out of my thermos jug. He's only about 3 years old, and he wanted to sip out of the thermos jug. So give him that, and boy, he thought he had some. I never forgot that. And then I stayed there for that long time, and my daughter, she was born at that time in 47. So we had a rich man's family. Doctor says, you're a rich man now, you got one of each. So then I stayed there for that 6 years, and then I moved and went to Atlantic City, a place called Butcher's Baby Land. It was the largest baby furniture store and toys in South Jersey. was located at 1633 Atlantic Avenue. So I stayed there over 7 years. So he went to work and I took care of all the stuff there and delivered stuff and all. And that's where my kids got a lot of toys and stuff too. I got them cheaper. I work overtime and let it go into the toys. Whatever needed or what we needed. I got her youth bed that way for her. So then I left there and went to, everything was going discount, so I left there and went to the school board at the Greater Egg Harbor Regional. Worked there 27 years and 4 months before I decided to pull anchor. So I pulled anchor there, and the guy told me at my retirement dinner, he said it'll take 3 to replace him. And I've been back since, and I hear they chopped my job up and 3 or 4 different guys got it. So I don't know. He says they're not doing the job like they were then. So I don't know. So now this year is not, we'll be married. No, not this year. This year we'll be married 44 years in June. So I don't know what's going to happen this year. We'll have to wait and see what happens. So that's as far as I can go now, I guess. But well, wait a minute, that's right though. After 50, almost 50 years, no, 45 years to the day. No. Anyway, 1939 I left home, in 1988. Yeah. 49 years after I went to sea, they finally decided to tell us we were supposed to be a veteran. So from the war. So they made us send in all kind of papers and everything to prove who the hell we were. And came. And I was supposed to retire, and I couldn't put in and say I was a veteran because I don't have no proof. I'd have to have proof, and they don't have no paper to prove it, and they hadn't proved it. So I had to wait I put in for the application in February. I didn't get it until December the 12th of 1948. So that would make it 49 years to the day, because the 13th would made, I've been there started on my 50th year, you know, for since I left home. So that's where I've been all my life, those 2 places. So I guess that's about it at the time being. I remember I worked at the winery. We went to work and we had to take the sugar up into the blending tower from where we pressed the grapes and everything. And we go to work and put the juice up top. We had to put sugar up there. So we had to carry it 100 pounds. So of course I swung up a 100-pound bag on my shoulder, and damn yellow jacket, he went to work and kicked it off of my back in a hurry. So the guys don't realize they stung me, you know. So I had carried it up there. We had blend the water and everything. And had to put water and sugar and all that. And then we used to have, after they pressed all the pulp out, the juices, we went to work and put them in big vats on wheels, and they push them around. And you used to put 2 boards across it to stand on. Then you had a board like a cedar tree with X marks, pegs across it. So when you take the thing and go up and down like that, it's called poking it, because you put it in there, they'd take and shoot water and yeast into it, and make it so they make the wine out of the pulp, the reddish stuff. And so I was poking it with this one day, and doggone, I stepped on some damn pulp come up onto the platform, and your feet go out from under you. So I fell down. It'd been putting her over my head, where the stuff would set it. Sometimes it'd come up about 2 or 3 feet right out of the top of the thing, over top the vat before they start poking it back down in again. So I went to work and slipped and fell down in that darn stuff. And boy, I didn't hit bottom. I come out in a hurry. Boy, it was hot. Burn your legs right off, you know. So I got back out again. But some guy used to say, well, you say, what do we do about that? Oh, that's too hot. That'll kill any germ or anything. So that's what we did. And let's see. Then we had 1948. They had a doctors' convention. Did I tell that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did tell that. Oh, gee. Well, I guess that's it then right now. So,